let me introduce Dr. Madan. In fact, he's my colleague. Okay, Dr. Madan Balaraman is an academic lecturer at the Department of Academic Excellence. Actually, he was formerly in Department of Information Technology. So now he's in the Department of Academic Excellence at Institute of Teacher Education, Ipoh Campus, Perak, Malaysia. He received his PhD, Doctor of Philosophy from University of Science, Malaysia in 2017. And then his master's degree was in a Master Science in ICT in 2005. And his bachelor's degree is also in IT education, information technology, IT education from Northern University of Malaysia, University Utara Malaysia in 2002. All right. And for information, Dr. Madan is very well versed in information technology, and I can consider him as an expert in information technology regarding IT or whatsoever. He's actively engaged in sharing his expertise with in-service teachers, particularly in Malaysia. And his research interest is focusing on IT in education, information technology in education, and also technology of education. All right. So with this short introduction of Dr. Madan, let us begin this slot with Dr. Madan on his topic on understanding conceptual and theoretical frameworks in research. Okay, Dr. Madan, hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ganesan. Okay, yes, for my colleagues. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for the organizing committee. Okay, to give another chance for me to share my knowledge. Okay, this time is regarding on the another part of the research methodology. Okay, whereby we can look under the understanding of conceptual framework and theoretical framework. Okay, let me start without you any time. We start our discussion. I would like to say this is more on discussion. Okay, so let me see what is framework. Okay, when you look at the framework, okay, described as an abstract logical structure of the meaning that guide the development of the studies. Okay, and if you look at when you come to the research methodology, okay, the two important things when we come up with our research, okay, the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework, the framework that's going to help us to guide us on our research. Okay, so when we look at this, all the framework are based on the identification of the key concept. Okay, when we mention the key concept, the variables that we are going to look, and the relationship among those concepts. Then, why we need this framework? Okay, as I mentioned earlier, why we need this framework? Okay, the framework is going to help us to keep on our track. Okay, keep on our research on our track. Okay, another thing is provide a clear links from the literature to the research goal and the questions. Okay, so when you look into here, okay, basically we will get some ideas for our research from our literature that we are going through. Okay, to get our research gap and so on. So this is the most important part. Provide clear links. Okay, and third one is have the research to see clearly the variables of the studies. Okay, based on as our researcher, we all know, okay, what is the variables, why we need to identify the variables, and how these variables are going to help on our studies. And fourth one, okay, clarify concept and propose the relationship among the concepts. Okay, so when we are going to see, we are going to see the interlink, okay, between the concept and how it's going to work within the concept. And is provide an organizing structure for the research design and the methods. Okay, so when you look into our design and the method, we are going to have a quantitative studies or qualitative studies. Okay, and then we are going to have a different type of research method. So how it's going to help on us. Okay, and another part, okay, why we need the framework. Okay, it's a useful prepare research proposal by using an experimental or descriptive method. Okay, so when we looking into our research, okay, why we are, how we are going to come up with our research. Okay, that is the most important thing, right? And apart from that, it's a guide the development and testing of the interventions and our hypothesis. Okay, how we are going to test our hypothesis, how we are going to develop our intervention. In addition for that, we're going to see here is provide a general framework for the data analysis. Okay, so what are the model, okay, the statistical model that we are going to choose in order to analyze your data. Okay, and we're going to see here the interpretation of the finding flow from the conceptualization representation by the framework. So we are going to see, okay, from, for example, the flow, that means from the A, B, C. So we're going to have a clear picture how the things is going to flow. Okay. Apart from that, okay, we are going to see what the importance of the framework. So then only we will know, okay, why we need to come up with the framework. Okay. We're going to make the research finding meaningful and generalizable. Okay, we have this framework. Okay, we can come out. Okay, we can say that, okay, our finding is more meaningful. Okay, as how Dr. Bala mentioned earlier. Okay, all this research and whatever things, it's become a policy right now. Okay, we are not merely doing the research for just to get a score, but we are going to propose something. Okay. Apart from that, we provide a reference point to the discussion of the methodology and analysis of the data, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, this one is the point of discussion for the methodology. Okay, and it's explain observation. Okay, based on our research finding and so on. Okay, it's with the theory that we are going to apply and so on. Okay, it's going to help us to explain that. Okay, and it's contribute to the trustworthiness of the study. Okay, for example, when you look into the critical framework, okay, because we are going to work on the theory. So when the theory is going to help us, okay, how we're going to carry out our research. Okay, and we say encourage the theory development that we use to the practice. Okay, so again, I'm going to quote the word that we're using by Dr. Prof. Bala. Okay, so we're going to encourage the theory that we develop to use in the practice. Okay, how are we going to generalize it? Okay, first, before we look into the conceptual framework, okay, we are going to see what is the concept. Okay, what do we mean by the concept? Okay, the concept, okay, is the abstract, describe, and the name an object or phenomenon, thus providing it's a separate, identify, and the meaning. Okay, and when we look into it, it's the intellectual presentation, representation of some aspect of reality that is derived from the observation made from the phenomena. Okay, that is what we look into a concept. Now we look into the definition by given on the conceptual framework. Okay, we have a lot of definition here, so I picked some of the definition. Okay, from the for the conceptual framework. Okay, the conceptual framework is a network or plane of interlinked concepts that together provide a comprehensive understanding of phenomena. This is mentioned by the Jabran 2009. Okay, Lester 2005, it mentioned that the conceptual framework is an argument that the concept chosen for the investigation and any anticipated relationship among them. Okay, whereby we can see here it will be given appropriate and useful. Okay, useful given to the research problem under the investigation. And Miles and Haberman 1994, okay, mentioned as framework, okay, conceptual framework explain either graphically or in a narrative form, the main thing to be studied, key factor, okay, construct or variable, and is presumed relationship among them. So these are some of the keywords that you need to be identified. Okay, study the key factor, construct or variable, okay, and the relationship among them. Okay, the framework can be rudimentary or elaborate, theory driven or commercial sense, or descriptive or casual. Okay, here we can see the conceptual framework, and the other way, some of us will be thinking, okay, how we are going to form the conceptual framework. Okay, by we looking at some of the definition here, okay, we can get some idea whereby this conceptual framework is was formed, okay, based on some ideas, some intuitions from the researcher. Okay, when we look at the Maxwell 1996, he mentioned the conceptual framework is a system of concept, assumption, expectation, belief, theory that support and inform your research. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, okay, this is the how we say based on our assumption, based on our idea, based on our intuition. And Rabbit and Ringer in 2012, okay, it's mentioned the conceptual framework as a both process and a framework that help to direct and ground researcher in an argument about why the topic of the studies matter, okay, why it's important, and why the method proposed to studies are appropriate and rigorous. Okay, these are the some of the definition that we can get it, okay, to be discussed over here. Okay, so now we will be look, okay, how this framework is characterized. Okay, so when we look into the conceptual framework, okay, a motivational for selecting concept and linking them to the research problem. Okay, so if you look at this, okay, we are going to have we are going to get some ideas, some concept here, and we are going to link them, okay, into our research problem, the gap that we are find. Okay, this is based on our literature review that we are going through and so on. Okay, a set of concepts and aspect of theory that assist in establishing coherence in the research. Okay, so these are some of the characteristics of a conceptual framework. And when we look here, okay, this conceptual framework is less developed than theories. Okay, basically, as I mentioned, this is an idea. Okay, this is an idea whereby we have to prove the idea, okay, based on our research. So that means there is no studies, okay, new theories, okay, have been proven earlier. So we are going to use some ideas, some theories, and so on to prove it that. Okay, so that's why you mentioned it's a less developed than theories. Okay, it's a given a direction to research just as the theoretical framework does. Okay, same like a theoretical framework. It's just a guidance. Okay, it's as we see earlier, we have a research framework. Okay, how we are going to conduct the research. Let's say we have a pre-post research. Okay, so we are going to have some steps that we follow. Okay, same goes to here. This framework, okay, going to guide us. And when we look at another part, is a dramatic representation of concept and their relationship in a specific research context. Okay, it can be this diametric concept here, okay, is referring to how we are going to show the interlink between the concept, between the variables, and so on. Okay, and when we look here, it's a linking abstraction to the empirical data. Okay, linking expression to the empirical data. Okay. Again, we are going to look into detail about this conceptual framework. And this consists of concepts that are placed within the logical and sequential design. Okay, when we said about the conceptual framework here, okay, it's within the logical and sequential design. Okay, it represents less formal structure. Okay, when we say the less formal structure, since this conceptual framework is designed, is developed by the researcher. Okay, so we don't have some specific formal structure. Okay, something like models and so on. Okay, and used for the study in which existing theories is inapplicable or insufficient. Okay, based on the specific concept and proposition derived from the empirical observation and intuition. Okay, as I mentioned earlier. So here it's based on our idea, our intuition, based on our studies. Okay, so we are going to get this conceptual framework. Okay, it may deduce theory from the conceptual framework, and it's deal with the abstraction. Okay, abstraction, that means it's a concept that are assembled by virtue of relevance of the common themes. Okay, with the common themes. Okay, later I'll show you some of the examples. Okay, how this conceptual framework, okay, will be formed. Okay, I'm using one examples later. Okay, this framework, conceptual framework. Okay, if you see how the researcher see the different concept and the outcome of the studies and its relation with each other. Okay, when we look into the theoretical framework, we have a similarly, it's almost same. Okay, but here, since we have its own way of designing, as I mentioned here earlier, okay, that is a less formal structure. Okay, so if we are going to look, okay, how it's going to relate each other, and it can be developed from the researcher personal experience, previous study, or from more than one theory or model. Okay, so as mentioned here, maybe we have done some studies, we have some going through some observation and so on. So it can be formed from there. The conceptual framework is provide a coherent, unified, and orderly way in seeing a related events or process relevant to study or research, and less formal than theory. Okay, this is earlier as I mentioned. Okay, here we are going to see that is a relationship, coherent, unified, and orderly way to seeing the related event. Okay, and it's a less formal than the theories. As I mentioned, there is no single theories is going to provide your conceptual framework. Okay, because when you design your conceptual framework, it's your own design. Okay, you are not going to take from anywhere else. You are not going to quote, okay, this conceptual framework is from here, here, and here. Okay, it's merely it's from you. Okay. Used when the concept from the different theories are borrowed to provide based on an investigation, because one theory does not cover all the concern of the study. Okay, as for example, maybe when we look into the education studies, right? Okay, you might be looking into the engagement, you might be looking into the knowledge construction. Okay, maybe you are looking into the motivational factor. So when we're looking into the different terms, different variables here, okay, and each one, they are going to have different theories. Okay, so as mentioned here, okay, one single theory is going to help on this conceptual framework. And when we look into the conceptual framework, it is broadly present understanding the phenomena of the interest and reflect the assumption and the philosophic view of the designer. Okay, so this is basically when you look into the researcher. Okay, the researcher is going to plan. Okay, how the research will be going to conduct. Okay, what are the variables? How it's going to merge together. Okay, for us together some output. Okay, and as I mentioned, it is a researcher own position on the problem. Okay, the way researchers shape it together, as mentioned earlier. And conceptual framework show the relationship of the stated hypothesis with the central factor or the key concept. Okay, the key concept. So what is the main variables over there? Okay, the relationship which is happen between your independent variable, dependent variable, and moderator variable. Okay, which is the main here? Okay, that is what we are going to show in the conceptual framework. And it's broadly present understanding of the interest and reflect the assumption, accept as a truth without proof, and philosophic view of the designer. Okay, basically, as I mentioned here, okay, this is, since I mentioned it's on the researcher observation, okay, researcher idea, or maybe he has read some, he get some ideas. Okay, so the way we work out here is based on the view of the designer, the researcher. Okay. When we look into this conceptual framework, okay, it's provide a roadmap for us, okay, whereby it's giving a big picture, okay, a big picture for us, okay, how we are going to carry out our research. Okay, here's some of the examples, one of the examples, how we are going to come up with the conceptual framework. Okay, as we look here, the environment influence on browsing. Okay, the environment influence on browsing. So here we have three variables here, that is social, academic, and professional. So when we're looking here, so maybe here we're going to have a different theory involved. Okay, and so we are going to find out the internet users purpose, the purpose of browsing, okay, in terms of social, academic, and professional. So, and when you look in here, okay, so the researcher is merely try to identify the internet browsing behavior. Okay, internet browsing behavior. So when we look into here, as I mentioned, the diagram, it can be changed, okay, as long it can show the relationship or either interlink, okay, between the concept that you are going to use. Okay, now let me look into theoretical framework. Okay, we are looking into some of the definition of the theoretical framework. Okay, the terms of theoretical framework is defined as the empirical or quasi-empirical theory of social or psychological process that a variety of level. Okay, when we say the variety of level, okay, it can be a grand, mid-range, or explanatory. Okay, that we can apply under the understanding of phenomena. Okay, this is from the Ansara 2008. Okay, in March 2004, okay, I mentioned that this framework is vital in guiding a research for ensuring coherence and establishing the boundary of the project. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, okay, even the conceptual framework, okay, also is a guiding for our research and to make sure we have our scope here. Okay, there is some similarity between the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. Okay, the theoretical framework is an empirical study to refer to a system of concept, assumption, expectation, beliefs, theory that inform the researcher. Okay, the researcher. A theory or theoretical framework could be described as well as develop coherent explanation for an event. Okay, this is from Ethel Jason 2013. And we have another definition of the theoretical framework, okay, from Bogatti 1996, whereby it's mentioned theoretical framework is a collection of interrelated concepts like a theory, but not necessarily so well worked out. Okay, a theoretical framework guide your research, determine what things will be measured and what statistical relationship you are looking for. Okay, so this is basically a mention on the theoretical framework. So when we look into this theoretical framework, okay, why it's important, why we need the theoretical framework. Okay, previously we looked why the conceptual framework is important. Now we're looking into the why the theoretical framework is important. Okay, it serves as a basis of research plan. Okay, so when we look into that, we need to have like a blueprint for our research framework, for our research and so on. Okay, so this is our research plan. So to make sure we have our guide, okay, in form of whether in a graphical format. Okay, the theory provides a point of focus for attacking the unknown in the specific area. Okay, when we look into the mention the attacking the unknown in the specific area. Okay, so for sure we are going to look into the gap that we found from the literature review and so on. Okay, so we are going to look into that particular section. If the relationship is found between two or more variables, the theory should be formulated to explain why the relationship is exists. Okay, so currently, okay, we can see a lot of theories been challenged. Okay, why previous researcher theory, okay, why it didn't work out with the current situation and so on. Okay, basically, when we look into this situation, okay, when we find out something, okay, so we can use that finding to explain, okay, why that particular thing is occur. Okay, the theoretical framework, the needs, they shape the research question and help to focus the studies. Okay, as we'll see, okay, by using a conceptual framework, we can create a research question as well. Okay, these are some similarities here. But the theoretical framework as well, it's provide us research questions. Okay, and it's allow researcher to narrow the project down to the manageable size. That means we have our scope. Okay, we have our focus area. Okay, what are the things we are not going to focus? Because if it's not in the manageable size, okay, I'm very sure, okay, we can't complete our research in the time frame that we fix. And when we look here, they situated the research within the scholarly discourse and link the studies to the broader body of the literature. Okay, so when we look here, okay, it's helped us, okay, to get some relationship with the literature. Okay, whereby it's going to give us a clear picture, okay, how our finding, okay, our researcher are going to be interrelate with the literature that the review that we are going to do. Okay, the theoretical framework also consists of theory that seems to be interrelated. Okay, basically a lot of journals, okay, research I mentioned, okay, basically when you mention about the theoretical framework, you might be having a one theory. Okay, you are going to focus on one particular single theory. Okay, so when here we see it consists of theory that seems to be interrelated. Okay, so the theory that for example, when you look into the knowledge construction, okay, okay, the constructive theory, it can be of a different type of constructive theory. Maybe we have a social constructive theory. Okay, so that particular things might be interrelated here. Okay, and then the explanation concern of the relationship between two or more variables or phenomena. Okay, so here we can see the conceptual framework also, we see a lot of variables are there. Okay, maybe 2 or 3 variables, even some more go up to the 4 variables. Okay, in the theoretical framework, so we are going to concern about the relationship 2 or more variables, which is focusing on that particular theory. Okay, the theory that we are going to choose. Okay, more formal and used for the study based on the existing theory. Okay, as compared to the conceptual framework. Okay, this one we said as a more formal because these theories are proven. Okay, there is a lot of research that has been done. Okay, that's why you mentioned as a more formal. Okay, and it's derived from the specific concept and proposition that are induced or deduced. Okay, as well as we say that it's adopt from the particular theory is enough to provide theoretical basis for the conduct of the studies. So as I mentioned earlier, okay, when we look into the theoretical framework, okay, when we choose the theory that is well established, okay, is a well established, a lot of research has been done, a lot of models are there, okay, to help us, okay, to guide us, okay, to conduct on our research. Okay, for example, this is one of the theoretical framework, okay, for understanding cognition and connectivity development, okay, whereby you see it, this theoretical framework is organizing the effect of the internet on cognitive development. Okay, so when we look into this, okay, so we are going to say, okay, visual input, text, and image. Okay, that is one of our variables here. Okay, so we are going to have a link between internet gaming participation. Okay, when we look here, Okay, we have a visual memory, attention, concentration, stimulus process, meta-connectivity, and we look, so by looking at the concept here, okay, we can get some ideas, okay, what are the theories that might be involved here. Okay. Okay, so for example, the theory that involved here is most basically about the mental process, okay, such as attention, perception, comprehension, memory, and problem solving, okay, which is basically involved about the cognition development. So the particular theory that involved in this theoretical framework is about the cognitive theory. Okay, now, okay, we have looked into the what is a framework, what is a conceptual framework, what is a theoretical framework. So I would like to summarize here, okay, the difference between the theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Okay, so when we look into the difference here, the theoretical framework used to be based on the existing theory, okay, based on the existing theory, which is tested and validated by other researchers. Okay, whereas the conceptual framework, it used to be grounded in the concept that provide from the main variable in the research inquiry. This is something the researchers, scholars develop themselves, okay, developed by themselves based on the theories. Okay, that is the first difference. Okay, and we'll look into the second difference. The theoretical framework provide a broader guidelines or a general set of ideas within which is a research studies can be fit in. Okay, whereas the conceptual framework relate to the specific ideas of the scholar used in their research studies. Okay, so when we look here, in the theoretical framework, we have a broader, okay, guideline of a general set of the ideas. Okay, for example, the theoretical framework, as I mentioned here, okay, we have a quite big area, okay, to be covered up, okay, in the theoretical framework. Okay, whereas when you look in the conceptual framework, okay, it's just focusing on the 3 different areas. Okay, or if you want to be in detail, we say it as a specific idea. So the theoretical framework is generally present in the shape of models that support the research study. Okay, even some of the theories, okay, they have come up with a model. Okay, they come up with a model where we can use the model and we can adopt the model to do our research. Whereas in a conceptual framework, it's represented by the research scholar own constructed model. Okay, own constructed model they use to showcase the relationship between the variable in the research work. Okay, it's take the shape on the adaptation of the model in the existing theory and so on. Even we can get some adaptation from the model, but basically when you look into the conceptual framework, okay, the researcher will come up with their own model. Okay, the other difference, okay, we are going to see is the theoretical frameworks need to be well developed, designed, and widely accepted. Okay, so when we look into the theoretical framework here, as I mentioned, the theory which is well tested, well validated, okay, so need to be used. Whereas in a conceptual framework, it needs not to widely accepted. For being a researcher, by own answer to the research problem, they are defined. Okay, because as I mentioned here, maybe the topic that they have chosen, the gap they find, okay, there's no research that has been done. Okay, that's why the researcher will come up with their own way of defining their the research problem. Okay, the theoretical framework provide a direction for the approach to the unknown research in the specific discipline. Okay, when you say this approach the unknown research in this specific discipline. Okay, whereas the conceptual framework offer a model that demonstrates how the research inquiry is to be conducted logically. Okay, so that means we have the steps, the process we have been conducted. Okay, whereas in the theoretical framework, okay, we need to be identified here. Okay, what are the research area we need to be identified, the gap that we need to be identified based on the theories here. Okay, and last but not the least, this theoretical framework, the difference that we can comprise of the theories appear to be interlinked with the proposition of the studies. In the conceptual framework, is comprised of the key interlinked concept, elaboration of the existing relationship between the variable, and how the research claim to respond to the research problem. Okay, so here when we look into the conceptual framework, there are some details, some explanation. Okay, or we can see it, it's more well explained. Okay, whereby this theoretical framework, as we say, we might be adapt from some models, some theories, and so on. Okay, so maybe we might be tied up with the way we come up with the finding or the way we have to conduct the research. Okay, for example, when we look into the some behavior theory, okay, some theories which is already tested. Okay, it's hard for us to be to counter back because the theory which is well researched, okay, you have validate. Okay, so it's a very that means that it's very established theory. Okay, whereas in the conceptual framework, okay, that's the time we're going to start. Okay, we're going to come up with our own idea. We are with our own finding to be explained. Okay, how these things is going to work. Okay, how the relationship between the variable. Okay, how this between the theories is going to work. Okay, for us to gather some the research finding. Okay, so if you see it, the research framework is allow ideas to be tried. Okay, because when as I mentioned earlier, this is based on our own idea. Okay, and if you look at here, some of the studies I mentioned that the conceptual framework mainly used for the qualitative research or mixed method research, whereas the theoretical framework most of the time they're used for quantitative and mixed method research. Okay, these are some of the journals, some of the writers, some of the books have mentioned that. Okay, with that, I think I'll end my presentation, and maybe we can go for some Q&A section or some discussion. Okay. Maybe I open the floor for some discussion.
Okay, Dr. Madan.
Oh, okay, Prof. Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Madan, for your slot on the conceptual and theoretical framework. And Prof. Bala, is there any question from you?
Yeah, Dr. Madan, very excellent presentation. I think repeating is one of the best, replication is one of the best. Keep on repeating, still we don't understand. Always blur, okay? Thank you, Dr. Madan. Open up the mindset of the research methodology. I think it's interesting. My question is, I think many of people still blur with the theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Probably doctor can give very brief be very easy to understand between these two. Why we use theoretical, why we use the conceptual. I think this is very much related to quantitative studies very, very much. If you don't understand this, sorry, you cannot proceed your quantitative study. Definitely you're looking for the trouble and you will commit suicide later on. So sorry I used the word. So doctor, he commits suicide because I can see that. But another question, that's first question, doctor. Second question. In qualitative, doctor, many still blur. Actually, we don't need to have a theory. We don't need to have theoretical framework. Do you agree with that? Or we don't need to have conceptual framework, but still can proceed the research. So can you open up a mindset here? The two questions. First is, what is the difference between theoretical, conceptual, and hypothesis? Because many people blur, why we need to use hypothesis. And you go back to qualitative, we don't use hypothesis, we just use a research question then you explore and so on. Do you need that or not? I think that's my fundamental question to you, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for your question, Prof. Okay, when we look into these two different theoretical and conceptual framework, okay, based on my understanding, based on my studies, okay, I would like to summarize here. basically what I will try to explain to my student. Okay, when you look into a theoretical framework, you should have some theory or some models, okay, whereby you rely on to work on it. Okay, whereas in the conceptual framework, okay, you come up with your own design research or your own design. Okay, for example, I'll give my research as examples, whereby I have three different theories that I applied. There is a knowledge construction, okay, I have used the engagement, and I have used the reflective thinking. Okay, so when we're looking into these three variables here, okay, how it's going to merge along, because and each one there is no dominant theories are here, it by stand by itself. Okay, so when we come up with the research, okay, whereby the variables stand by itself, okay, most of us will be suggest we go for the conceptual framework, okay, because based on what my supervisor, okay, what my group mentioned here, okay, these are the research, okay, there's no one have done it earlier, okay, you are the only person now going to do it, okay, so you are coming up with the ideas, you are coming up with the variable, dependent variable, independent variable, moderator variable, all those things. So when you are putting up all those things, it's going to come up with a different theories here. So that's why the conceptual framework, the design of the conceptual framework is more appropriate. Whereas when we're looking into we are relying on one particular theory, okay, when we are relying on one particular model, okay, so we can go on theoretical framework. I think maybe that answered my first question, Prof.
Okay, Doctor. But never mind, we still can debate later on in the next workshop again. Interesting.
Okay. Regarding the high quantitative, qualitative studies, okay, whereby there is no need for frameworks and so on. Okay, Doctor, the reason why we need the framework, okay, whether it's a research critical framework or research framework, is just to give us a guidelines. Okay, what are the theories that we are going to use? Okay, for example, like qualitative research. Okay, I think for sure we are going to come up with some theories are there, some models are there. Am I right, Doctor?
Yeah, of course. But they're different type of school now. I mean,
when we're talking about the education research, Doctor, okay, so again, even if we do a merely quantitative studies, okay, we need to have a theory that to back up our finding and so on. So again, the framework will be there to guide us, okay, to help us. And when come to the hypothesis, of course, at the beginning stage, okay, when I become a researcher, I was a bit shocked when I saw some of my colleagues, when they don't have hypothesis in their proposal presentation. I was shocked. Why? How come there's no hypothesis? Okay, then when I did some studies, some reading and so on. Okay, so I think the research question is good enough to be answered their research problems.
But actually, hypothesis more related to quantitative, and quantitative more related to positivism. Positivism more related to prediction. Anything you predict, you need hypothesis, because without the tools, you cannot run the overall analysis of data, because how are you going to prove that prediction? But whereas in qualitative, we don't need to predict. We are going to the field and understand, and of course, we relate to the theory. So both actually, we are in the same boat. Only thing that different paradigm, different things. So I think I understand what Doctor said. Some no use the hypothesis because they use the research question. Yes, qualitative, we always go for the research question.
Research question.